Oh man, it's time for another episode of No Label Live, the show all about labels and how they can be your biggest adversity or your biggest advantage. The choice is yours. Each week we bring on inspiring guests to share their story about how labels have impacted their life and the work that they do. So let's strap in and join this conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, what's going on? We are diving into a conversation with my buddy Brock. Brock, I don't go for the easy questions out of the gate, my man.
Here we go.
Here's what I want to hear your insight on.
Yeah.
When people are hearing, seeing the story of Brock, what's the most important part of the story that people that you know are unaware of?
The most important part of my story that I know people are unaware of.
Yeah.
I don't know that many people or that everybody is unaware of it, but I think for me, it's that, just growing up, I was extremely shy. I was extremely insecure, whether it be about my physical appearance, whether it be about the way that I talked. I've spoken several times before about how many times I've just taken this like bird's eye, like watcher sort of judgmental view of myself over the years. And it took a lot of work to realize how much that didn't serve me. And just to realize that all the insecurity, all of the beliefs, the lack of confidence, it was nothing that was wrong with me. It was just something that I was sort of stuck inside. But it didn't have to be that way. Like, yeah, there was going to be a curating process that I had to sort of take responsibility for at the end of the day. But, it wasn't until I started listening to several people on podcasts, reading a lot of books, that I started to shift out of some of these beliefs and these ways of being that I was sort of existing in at the end of the day, that I just realized no longer served me.
Mm.
And some things were aha moments, and again, other things were sort of a curating process. And so today I've got a podcast. I put myself out there on social media to some extent. I'd like to show up more, but again, that's coming from a place of judgment, so I don't want to be too hypercritical of myself there. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people think I come across very, just confident and fluid and, certain of myself. And, once upon a time, that was very much not the case. I was so crippled to even speak up, like whether it was at work, whether it was in a friend group, because I was just so afraid of judgment and just wanting to fit in and being liked by people. And so I was just so, again, crippled by that for so long. And yeah, that's one of the major shifts that I've had to make throughout the course of my life. And a lot of people come into contact come into contact with me today, and they're just sort of in disbelief that that's the person that I once was. But that person still exists and still likes to try to have a seat at the table sometimes. But as I was speaking about on one of our chats yesterday, some of those tendencies are, they're a scary dog sometimes, rather than the fire breathing dragon that they once were. So
Scary
that's the
dog. I like that. That's
yeah,
a
it's
good
it's it's it's
shift.
tameable. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
tameable. So
You
yeah,
can
man.
put a leash on a dog. I don't think you can necessarily do that with a dragon.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly, man.
so when you think back about those conversations and those points when you were really looking for that acceptance, because I think that's something that we can all relate to, and at some point,
Yeah.
no matter where we are and how much work we've done, it really does come down to we want to be accepted because we're social creatures, and acceptance helps us survive. But when you think about those moments early on in your life, what was the conversation that kind of made you feel like, hey, me being me isn't enough? right now?
Mm. I think back to when I first moved here to Arizona, and I had to start at a new school, and I was 12 years old. That's a really challenging time, even if you already know the people that you're surrounded with. But, as you are completely stepping into a new environment and new people and new surroundings, a new state, a new school, all of it, there's a lot of anxiety that comes with that. And so, yeah, I mean, the conversation that I had with myself was just I want to find friends. I want to be accepted. I want to fit in, and I want to do what it takes to um, sort of find myself in a group of people that I can call my tribe at the end of the day. And so, one of my first days at middle school, I remember going into the cafeteria, getting my lunch, looking around the crowded cafeteria, like, all right, where am I going to sit?
Yeah.
There's not really like an open place where I can like sort of isolate myself and just do my own thing. It's very, very crowded. And so I still attempted to sort of find a spot to myself. So I went outside, but nonetheless, like some of the tables still had people there. And so I was like, all right, you know what? I'm just going to have to pick a table and sit down and like say what's up to these people. And so I did. I got over myself and I sat down at this table and I was like, what's up, guys? Like, is it cool if I sit there? And everybody just kind of like laughed and like looked at each other. And that was sort of like, as trivial as it may seem to, somebody on the outside looking in, like, that hit me pretty deep to my core. And I was like, wow, like just instant, like, unacceptance.
Yeah.
So I think that was a very monumental moment where I started just doing whatever it took to be accepted, to be liked, to fit in, and just sort of dismissing who I was in order to be a part of the tribe. So that's kind of where that all started, and it kind of it went on for a long period of time. And again, it still shows up sometimes because it's very human. We want to be a part of the tribe. We don't want to be abandoned and left to starve and die. But
Yeah.
of course, that's not what's going to happen to us today.
Yeah.
At least in the society that you and I live in. Um, but yeah, that was very much the conversation that was going on. Was just trying to fit in.
Man, yeah, I relate to that so much because my family moved around the same when I was the same age, moved right when I was going into middle school. And yeah, those feelings of not knowing anybody, having to find new people, and yeah, that feeling of acceptance for sure. Um, like one of the greatest things that happened for me was my mom. I actually got bullied when I started middle school, and it was, if you listen to my mom tell the story, it was from more of the administration than the students that bullied me. And so I left and got homeschooled for like a semester and a half, something like that.
Mm,
And when I was like, nah, I can't do this anymore. I got to be around kids. I can't sit at home by myself. But she, her knowledge, she's like, okay, so you're going to have to do this. She would give me homework where it was take a note card and I want you to have one person fill out their name and their phone number for so she would know that I was talking to people. And
mm,
what's always stuck with me, the foresight to be like, okay, let's turn this into some sort of game where he has to do this, because a lot of times we get in our head and would I have done that if she didn't like present that as a possibility for me? I don't know, but I relate to that a whole lot, and I'm sure people listening and watching relate as well. So as you look back on that experience and like the doing whatever it took, what can you see now? What has opened up for you now as the person that you are that it wasn't possible for you to see back then?
Yeah, I think it just goes back to the people pleasing. Again, doing whatever it took to not rub anybody the wrong way, to not make anybody mad, to not be um, dismissed by anybody. And so that's a lot of the reason why it was hard for me to even speak up in certain situations, because I didn't want to say something that somebody didn't agree with or whatever. And I think that's the major thing that today I've been able to shift out of, is especially as I'm, hosting a podcast and putting my voice out there, putting content out there, all these things, and just continuing to show up regardless of, somebody being rubbed the wrong way by something that I say or a perspective that I have. And as corny as it is to say, it's that saying that you can be the ripest peach, but somebody still hates peaches. And I
Yeah,
can't do anything about that, right? So I
yeah.
think that's one of those realizations that I've had, is like, you can't save everyone, and B, you're not going to be liked by everyone. And it's just it's a very futile and exhausting process to try to be liked by everyone. And so that's just something that I've been able to let go of. And again, I think it's one of those things it was a realization, like, yeah, I know I'm not going to be liked by everybody, but that acceptance piece was a whole nother step.
So, what kind of like, what's the first time you remember actually feeling like, hey, I took the courageous step and did something where there's a whole lot of potential that somebody's not going to like it, but I'm okay with that. Like reaching that acceptance. What first showed up for you when you started to create that for yourself?
I don't think I can really point to a specific moment or this, snap of a finger realization that I had, that I can really like pinpoint. I think it was a little bit more of a process, and it really just goes back to, honestly, a little over a year ago, when I started to let go of some habits that I had, that I didn't really see myself as being supportive of the person that I was trying to become. I didn't see them as supportive of the space that I was trying to step into, as supportive of some of the things that I was trying to do over the next few years of my life. And so it really just, it started with saying no to a
Mm.
lot of things, being able to choose what I knew was best for me, deep down, again, based on the person that I wanted to be, the person that I was trying to become, and just not being afraid to choose myself in those instances, to turn down going out to the party or the bar or whatever it is, and deciding to stay home and just read and study and work on my podcast, or listen to a podcast, or play guitar, or whatever it was. I think that was something it was hard for me, because again, it goes back to the people pleasing. You just want to always say yes, you want to always accept the invitation, all of those things that, show people that you're down for whatever it is that like they want for you, right? And
Yeah.
you know you I sort of started to abandon myself a lot, for the sake of doing what other people wanted me to do. And so that's where it really started, I think, for me, is just learning to say no, and again, just choose myself and what was best for me.
Oh man, yeah. No is a powerful, powerful word. And we think of it a lot of times in terms of it being a negative thing, but no is a very empowering word, as you've just
Yeah.
described from your own story. But again, when you are that people pleaser is on the shoulder and it's saying, no, but we have to. Like, I think you get to choose between two different things. You're choosing between the people pleaser, or you're choosing between being resentful towards yourself at the end of the day if you
Yeah.
continue to let other people's opinions of you rule what you do. Because how many of us have felt like when we're faced with something we know we don't want to do? I mean, just saying, people don't like saying no in general. They'll say, they'll say, maybe. Will you be at the party? Maybe. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we all know that's no.
Yeah, it's like
But
you may as well just say no.
yeah, like,
But we have a hard time doing that because we
yeah,
don't want to upset anybody. So
yeah, and
yeah,
then we end up upsetting ourselves, and we
yep.
wonder why we're mad and why we're dealing with the judgment and all that stuff, and we're really just the mirror reflected back to us, and we don't like what we created in the mirror. Um, so you said it's this process has kind of been happening a lot over the last year, and so yesterday we talked about like using your voice. So
Yeah.
this is one step in that process for you and your podcast and everything. So over the past year, what have you learned about the power of your voice specifically?
I think Heather said it best to me, actually, our mutual friend Heather. She said there's a lot of things that we who are in this sort of this personal growth journey, self-help, whatever you want to, whatever label you want to put on it, right? Um, there's a lot of these things that sort of begin to become second nature to us. And we think it's like a duh type of concept or topic or realization, or it's just this general understanding that we have at this point. And that's just not the case for a lot of people. So again, it's being able to share some of these things that might be cliche, that might be second nature to some of those who are in our tribe, if you will. But there's plenty of people out there that's going to be a breakthrough idea or conversation or topic to them. And so I think for me, again, as much as I've wanted to not say something because I thought it was too cliche or it was too obvious, it's just not the case for a lot of people. So that's what's allowed me to speak up and share ideas and speak on some of the things that I've learned that have gotten me to the place that I am today. And I think that's been the biggest piece of me finding my voice, and again, just being willing to share ideas and realizations that I've had, because I know there's somebody else, to the point that we were making before we started recording, there's somebody who is in that place that I once was that doesn't have the realizations and the understandings that I have today. So who am I to not speak on some of those things and share my thoughts and ideas, and to rob that person of their potential transformation and growth?
Mm. So I love the way you put that because it made me think of who was that person or people that spoke that into you.
Are you asking me? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Who spoke that into me? I think, honestly, I'm not the biggest Grant Cardone guy, but this is something that he said one time, and it really, really hit home for me. And I'm paraphrasing here, but it just speaks to what I just said. It's like, who are you robbing of growth and transformation because you're too scared and you're silencing yourself? You're protecting your own ego. You're protecting your own potential judgment from other people, you know, and in that process, you're just dismissing the fact that you have something valuable to say, and there's something that you have within you, within your story, within your growth, within your transformation, that is going to be, absolutely groundbreaking for somebody else. But again, we just dismiss that. And a lot of times, so many people are afraid of being seen and being heard, and they think they're going to be judged, they're not going to be liked, all of these things that we're talking about. So they just don't say anything at all, and they're protecting their own ego out of their fear of what somebody else might think. And so that was a major realization that I had, was I was silencing myself out of my own fear of what somebody else might think.
And I love the fact that you said you learned this from somebody that you don't really like, you don't follow them on a big level, because that just speaks to when, well, I believe when you're ready for the message, it's going to be sent by the right messenger.
Yeah.
And so when you speak whatever your message is at the moment, to also not put expectations on who's going to show up as part of your tribe. Like the people who listen to this, and I'm sure the people who listen to your show are probably people at some point you're like, well, I never expected that to be uh, who's following me and who my message is resonating with. Because I think that all the time. I'm like, I wonder how this person found this and what resonated with them. So that being open to just be who you are and not put expectations on who comes back to you through putting that out is huge.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
you mentioned being seen and being heard. Um, what does being seen look like for you?
As it relates to other people, or what does that feel like when I
Feel
feel
like
seen
for
and heard?
you,
For
yeah.
me,
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, it's really just having that feeling of somebody is actually present with me. They're making eye contact with me. They're not checking their phone. They're not distracted by all their surroundings. They're not quick to respond. A lot of people talk about, the biggest problem that we as humans have is listening. And because we're constantly thinking about the next thing that we want to say instead of really listening to what that other person is saying, and then processing that, really taking that in, absorbing it, and then responding, and then replying, and then giving our own thoughts when we feel those are um, warranted and necessary. And so I think for me, when I can really just see that somebody is listening, somebody's really holding that space, somebody's really present with me, I think it's very, very obvious, and it's very easy to distinguish that from, somebody who is just anxiously waiting to, share their thoughts or respond whatever's on their mind. Again, or they're distracted by the surroundings, their phone or whatever it is. There's a lot of things at play there. But again, it's very, very easy for me to distinguish it from one side or the other.
Yeah, I mean, presence is so important, and like you're saying, those distractions, like we're in a world full of distractions.
Notifications, bings, dings, all these things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. When the biggest gift that we probably have, and I think it's one of the things personally that we're going to see happen after whatever all this COVID looks like is I think we are getting um, a lot more opportunities to be present with one another and to actually be able to see what other people are going through right now. Now, what we do with that power is yet to be seen because we're not through this thing yet. But I hope and I believe that it will make us stronger as a human tribe. And we'll see. We'll see because I can't control that, and I can just control my part of it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, technology is, ruling the world in a sense. It rules our day-to-day lives, and it's very, very helpful, and it's a very, very useful tool. But it's sometimes really hard to draw that line between what's too much, what's not enough, how much attention should I be giving to this thing, or when do I need to separate myself from the screen. And I think you make a good point where there's going to be a lot of growth for a lot of people on the other side of this whole experience that we're in right now. And some people maybe not so much. Some people are going to get really lost in the sauce, if you will, of technology and whatnot. And there's the other side of people who are just desperate for real human connection.
Mm-hmm.
I've been following this guy named James Silvis. A lot of people might not be familiar with him, but I connected with him when I was working at Nike, and he conducted this thing called the presence experiment. And it's something that I really, really wanted to take on, but I never got a chance because I was formulating it, sort of around the time that this catastrophe unfolded, if you will. So but the whole concept is he just like set up a sign like in the middle of a mall that said the presence experiment, can you stay present? And people would walk up to him and inquire about it, and he would just invite them to sit down and just sort of lock eyes and just hold that presence in that space with each other, because that's really, really uncomfortable for us
Yeah,
for a lot of us to do, is just sit there and make eye contact with somebody with no expectation of an outcome. And if some thoughts come up, you're free to share them and just see what unfolds as a process of allowing somebody else to be seen, but allowing yourself to be seen in that process too. And then you can kind of reflect on what that experience was like for each other after the fact. And yeah, he's got some footage of it, and I can I can share that with you if you'd like. But I thought it was just a really beautiful thing, and just another way in which I wanted to put myself out there. So I still want to do it. But
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's funny as you're saying that, I'm thinking about we're looking at each other on a computer screen. And
Hmm.
most of the time when I watch stuff back that I do, if I'm doing it with another person like this, most of the people see me looking down, and it's because I'm looking at your actual face and the camera's up here. And I'm like, I
Yeah, I'm
feel,
not going to stare into the camera because that feels weird.
well, yeah,
I
I
want to
feel
look at
like
you. Yeah.
I want to look at you,
Hmm.
even if everybody else thinks I'm just looking down. I'm like, I want to look at the person.
Yeah.
Um, it's so interesting. So I didn't do that exact experiment, but I definitely did something that was like, it could be a another type of that experiment. And man, when you take the time to just look at someone and look them in the eye, and I think the important part of the present, being present, is, again, I'm just going to hammer it home and hammer it home, is to not have an expectation, to
Yeah.
just be there and just look. Man, you can get to know a whole lot about a person just by looking in their eyes. Like, I think they say the eyes are the window to the soul. I
Yeah.
think that that is so true after doing that. Because I watch people just start crying when we did it. And the
Mm.
funniest funniest thing that happened for me was when I was in the real world and not in this um, environment of a training, and I did it. I remember going to a gas station and I was filling up my tank, and there was a lady on the other side filling up her tank, and she went and grabbed something out of her driver's seat. But I just looked at her and I smiled, and I kept, like, I just was kept looking and kept smiling, and then I looked away and did what I had to do, and she came back and she had to throw something away. But before she left, she went all the way around the tank onto my side just to look at me and see, like, smile back at me. And it was the funniest thing, because
Yeah.
we spend so much time with our hand in front of our face with our phone right here, or looking away because of that feeling of judgment, I think, for the most part,
Yeah.
that we don't really get to know people on a level that we could just from doing something that simple.
Yeah, and that eye contact is something that is very, very interesting, because it's something that I struggled with for a lot of time, or for a long time. I think it was that social anxiety, it was that insecurity, it was that worry of judgment. So it's easier for me to look away because I'm not, having to focus on, somebody else's facial expressions or how they're responding to the things that I'm saying, and I can sort of just be in my own world, right? And so, yeah, as I've just allowed myself to absolve myself of that judgment and just hold that space for somebody else, you're just able to connect with people on a deeper level, because just like you said, the eyes are the window to the soul, and if you're not going to be able to have that exchange with somebody, you're just not going to be able to connect on that level, and it's gonna be surface level, which is I think a really unfortunate part of a lot of relationships that we have today, whether it's with those that we feel as if they're the closest to us. I think there's so many layers to be peeled back still.
Dude, so I've never thought of this analogy before, but this is what your comment just brought up for me about surface level. So life and connection is like a lottery ticket, man, and the scratch off ticket. And most of the time we don't ever scratch to find the gold that's underneath. We don't scratch the surface to find the gold that's underneath. We just keep it the way that it is because it's like Schrodinger's cat, right? If we don't do it, it could still be a winner. And we'll never know. Like, for those who don't know the experiment, there's a cat in a box. Is it alive or is it dead type of deal? And if you don't open the box, you can always imagine that it's alive. And I think that surface level thing is like, it's our automatic response most of the time. And we like to spend time thinking that we're the only person going through hard times. So we don't want to burden other people with our hard times. So we don't talk about it. In reality, somebody's going through the exact same thing, and having that conversation could be the greatest gift that we give each other, because then we know that that's a lie, that we're alone in whatever we're facing because somebody else is going through it too.
Yeah, that's huge, man. And that's, a lot of the work that you're doing with loneliness and isolation and all these really subpar, which is not the word I really want to use, for lack of a better word, but human experience at the end of the day, that isolation, that loneliness, that feeling like we're the only one experiencing what it is we're feeling. And then, this goes into the whole, like, how are you? Oh, I'm great. Like, but I'm really maybe not great, but we don't want to be that burden for other people. We don't want to just dump all of our emotions and, what we happen to be going through onto somebody else, because we don't want to be the Debbie Downer or whatever it is. And so, yeah, that's a tricky field to play on.
So, I've got a couple more questions for you.
Yeah.
So when you think about your future and where you want to be and what you want to create in the world, what does that look like sitting here today?
That's a great question, man. And it challenges me to really get clear on that vision that I have for myself and my life. I've got the podcast. I'm starting to put myself out there. And I think, the future self is just totally free, right? Free from judgment, free from insecurity, free from worrying about what other people think, free from beliefs of inadequacy, not enoughness, all these things that so many of us experience, but we're shameful to admit because, it's an experience that we're having and we don't want to be having that experience. And other people put themselves out there in a way as if they're not experiencing that, because social media can oftentimes be highlight reels and all these things. And so, I want to continue to shift out of some of those things. Like I said, I've tamed a lot of these things, but they still like to be, weeds that grow, and I have to trim them back a little bit. And it's been a challenge to entirely uproot some of these things. And so I just want to continue to step into, Brock 2.0 and Brock 3.0, and in that share what has allowed me to get to those levels, so we can bring more people into that space as well. And whether I'm doing that with the podcast, or whether it's a book that I'd love to write someday, or this this wellness hub that I'd like to create, that's got yoga and juice bars and meditation centers and gyms and all these things, and it's just a huge community of people who are trying to reach that optimized state of being, as I like to say. And a lot of it starts up here, right? We've got to focus on the physical. We got to focus on our diet and some of these things. But I've been to the place where I had all those things dialed in, but like I was still not in a good place up here. And so again, I just want to continue to shift into that next level of Brock and bring other people along with me too.
What's the one thing, as you get into that frame of mind and that way of being, what's the one thing that you can start to do today to let go of whatever in the moment is the biggest thing that you feel like is holding you back from stepping towards that?
I think it's just that fear that I still have of messing up, and just realizing that that's part of the process. You know, it's everybody was new at whatever it is that they're doing at one point, and so it's giving myself permission to fall on my face, to fail, if you will. You know, want to
Mm-hmm.
be careful with that word, but um, yeah, I think that's just it. Just continuing to challenge myself and step into that next level, whatever that looks like. You know, I can't predict what's going to happen tomorrow, but you know, I just continue to move the needle forward every day and just give myself permission to mess up and just learn in that experience, because that's all it is. We're all on this continuous journey of learning and getting better and understanding what serves us and what doesn't. And the more I can just lean into all of it, right? Embracing everything and not being in resistance to, um, again, just being new at something and just continuing to show up completely free of what somebody else might think, as long as I know I'm standing in my truth and my intentions are to, you know, become a better person myself, but not from a place of lack. And again, just bring other people along that journey as well, because that's just what it's all about for me.
All right, man. Yeah, well, I have no doubts that you will create something great, whatever that looks like. And I know that people that are following you probably feel the same way. So I've never told you this, but at least I don't remember telling you this. But whenever I think of you, man, I always think Brock, the man in black, like Johnny Cash. Brock is the unconventional leader's man in black. So I'm curious, what's the deal with always wearing black, my friend?
It goes with everything. There's no way to not match if you're always wearing black. So, yeah, I don't know, man. I don't think there's any significance to it. I do have some opportunity to wear some other colors and, you know, introduce a little bit more brightness into my wardrobe. But yeah, there's no way for you to not match if you're wearing neutral colors. So
All right, man.
it,
Hey.
it says nothing about my soul, I promise.
Yeah, man. I always think about that, and it always like pops in my mind. The man in black, here he is. Let's
It's
hear what
hilarious, man.
let's hear what he's got to say. Um, Man, so if anybody's watching and they want to connect with you, how can they do that?
Oh man, I mean, if you're checking this out on Facebook, I'm just continually looking to connect with more people, just have amazing conversations and develop more relationships and connections, and just build my tribe even greater than it already is. And so definitely connect with me on there, or Instagram. I hang out a lot on there. I'm at Brock Richard with an underscore, because unfortunately it was my name was taken. But besides that, yeah, I'd absolutely love it. I would be utterly grateful if anybody who's watching this just gave my podcast a listen. Sharpen Your Sword on iTunes. The mission is for you to just be able to optimize your life experience based on whatever the guests that I have on share, as well as my own personal insights and experiences go as well. So yeah, between Facebook, Instagram, and my podcast, that's where I'm hanging out the most right now.
And with your podcast, what's one thing that you have learned during your journey thus far about yourself from your guests?
What have I learned about myself from my guests?
Yeah, from the conversations you've had.
I think it's just it's been a realization in my own ability to connect with people, which I didn't believe that I had before. You know, it just goes back to not wanting to speak up and being really shy growing up and all these things, and just this belief that I didn't have it in me to hold a conversation, to really connect with somebody, to ask deep and pressing questions. And so, you know, maybe on episode 1, I really wasn't there, but, you know, 22 episodes in, and I can already see a lot of growth that I've had within myself, and just how much more comfortable I am with it. You know, there's there's still anxiety that shows up sometimes, but again, it's one of those things that I've gotten a bigger hold on. And yeah, it's just realizations of there's always growth, there's always the next level to get to, and there's no finish line, right? And
Yeah.
it's just that understanding that I'm going to be getting better every day. And again, there is no finish line, and there's no reason to judge myself for who I once was, because I'm doing everything that I can today to make the most of this conversation in this moment and bring out in the guest or myself whatever's coming through. So yeah.
Yeah. And the beautiful thing is, um, so Peter Crone talks about potential, right, all the time. And
Yeah.
he's like, uh, we don't ever want to reach our potential
Mm-hmm.
because
Because then what?
then it's over, right? And I agree to the point that I think we've all been given something that we were created to bring to the world. And I believe the moment that we die, whatever we were created to bring to the world, that's the moment in which we've actually reached our purpose. Like, no matter what it is. Because I know there are people that are saying, um, then why do bad things happen? It's, I think even bad things serve a purpose. And I think that is the moment when we reach our potential, is when it's over. I think we reach what we were meant to reach, and we don't have control over what that is. Even if we have something that we think is much bigger, one conversation with somebody could change the whole trajectory of a world. And you look at it as one conversation, but you never know what that person went out and created necessarily. So
Exactly. Yeah. One quote, one book, one comment that somebody said on a podcast. I know there's instances in my life where that's been completely transformative for me. And yeah, so again, who are we to silence ourselves because we're robbing others of their growth if we do that? So yeah, man.
so last question. What does no label defines me mean to you?
What no label defines me means to me is that, no matter what we tell ourselves about ourselves, that's our own truth, that's our own belief. And that means it's not necessarily a capital T truth, because somebody else might see us in a completely different way than we see ourselves. And it's our responsibility to create empowering labels for ourselves so that we can step into that highest version of ourselves. But at the end of the day, we're humans, and I think that's the only label that we can really give ourselves at the end of the day.
Yeah, yeah. I believe that so much. I put it on a t-shirt.
Did you? Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
yeah.
I promise I haven't seen that before.
No, absolutely, man. I agree with that. That's the one label that we all have in common, is we're a human being.
Yep.
All the other ones, at the end of the day, they're all choices, and they're all subjective to what we believe. And you brought up an interesting point. Like, thank goodness sometimes people don't see uh, the truth as being what we see, because we would be very limited if we were only able to see things from our point of view.
Yeah, we're stuck inside our own jar, and sometimes it takes somebody else to speak that greatness into us, to speak that belief and that higher potential again
Yeah.
that we have for ourselves. And sometimes we just can't see that in ourselves, and it takes somebody else to be that catalyst for our own growth and belief in what's possible.
Yeah. Well, ladies and gentlemen, make sure that uh, if you got something out of this conversation today, make sure and share it out with your friends, with your family, with anybody in your tribe, so that they may find within this show that one thing that moves them forward. Because as we said, it can come from interesting places when you don't place expectations on things. Make sure and go give our man Brock a follow. Go listen to his show so you can sharpen your sword. And with that, we will see you again next Friday.
Nathan, thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of No Label Live. If you did, share it with a friend and tag me. Let me know your thoughts about the episode. Connect with me on Facebook and Instagram at The Loneliness Coach. You can also become a member of the No Label fam by joining our Facebook community. Let a friend know that they are more than a label. They matter, and they are one step away from their success. Remember, my friends, be patient, be diligent, and never quit.